What caused the American War of Independence? It is anything but a simple answer, as there were many key catalysts that ignited the flame of independence in the hearts of American colonists, eventually bringing the Americans and Great Britain into all-out war. We will dive into what exactly brought this explosive period in history to fruition, as it would go on to change the dynamics of the world forever. This is the cause of the American Revolution. Make sure to leave a like, turn on notifications, and subscribe for more history. Coming off the heels of the French and Indian War, the British emerged triumphant in 1763. Acquiring a vast amount of territory, these newly found territories increased the regional power for Britain. However, it also put them into financial strain after the long 7 Years' War with France, prompting the British government's decision to impose new taxes on its colonies. In 1765, the Stamp Act was imposed to provide increased revenues to meet the costs of defending the enlarged empire, followed by the Townshend Acts in 1767, passed by Parliament in an attempt to assert authority over the colonies. The acts were resisted with verbal agitation and physical violence, including the notorious method of tar and feathering. The unrest would not let up. In Boston, a small British Army detachment that was threatened by mob harassment opened fire and killed 5 people. This would become the infamous Boston Massacre. The soldiers were charged with murder and were given a civilian trial. John Adams was the attorney that successfully defended them. 3 years later, another key event would take place, with mounting protests on the tax on tea, taxation without representation, and the perceived monopoly of the East India Company. A party of Bostonians thinly disguised as Mohawk Indians boarded ships at anchor and dumped about 10,000 British pounds worth of tea into the harbor. The Boston Tea Party would show the British that the American colonists were willing to go to whatever lengths in order to not pay taxes. Civil unrest was at an all-time high. In retaliation for colonial resistance to British rule during the winter of 1774, the British Parliament enacted measures that became known as the Intolerable Acts. The oppressive acts became the justification for convening the First Continental Congress, later in 1774. Called by the Committees of Correspondence in response to the Intolerable Acts, the First Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia. 56 delegates represented all the colonies except Georgia. Delegates met to discuss America's future under growing British aggression. With the idea of war on the rise, Virginian Patrick Henry defended strong convictions for equipping the Virginia militia to fight against the British in a fiery speech in a Richmond church with the famous words, "I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." All would come to a head a month later. On the evening of April 18, 1775, Paul Revere rode to Lexington with the news that British soldiers stationed in Boston were about to march into the countryside. It was thought they would continue on to the town of Concord to destroy the Colonial armory. Trailing behind him was a British force of 700 men that was met at Lexington by 77 local Minutemen. When all of a sudden, the shot heard around the world was fired. Although it is unclear who fired the first shot, it would spark a skirmish that left 8 Americans dead. Severely outgunned and equipped, the Americans were forced to retreat to Concord. News of this spread like wildfire in the surrounding towns. British troops continued their push to Concord, thinking it would be an easy victory. At Concord, the British were met by hundreds of militiamen. Outnumbered and running low on ammunition, the British column was forced to retreat to Boston. On the retreating march, American snipers took a deadly toll on the British. Total losses in the Battle of Lexington and Concord numbered 273 British and more than 90 Americans. The battle proved that the British weren't invincible, and that the idea of liberty was now a realistic goal to fight for. The ways of the old world were coming to an end. With the conclusion of Lexington and Concord, the stage was set in which the Americans would enter into a point of no return. What would transpire in the coming years was a war with the most powerful military in the world. Even though the colonies were torn on the prospects of dealing with an all-out conflict with Great Britain, one thing was certain: war was coming. It began as a response to oppressive British rule, with colonists yearning for freedom and self-governance. By June 1776, with the Revolutionary War in full swing, a growing majority of the colonists had come to favor independence from Britain. On July 4th, the Continental Congress voted to adopt the Declaration of Independence, drafted by a five-man committee including Franklin and John Adams, but written mainly by Jefferson. That same month, determined to crush the rebellion, the British government sent a large fleet, along with more than 34,000 troops to New York. In August, Howe's redcoats routed the Continental Army on Long Island. Washington was forced to evacuate his troops from New York City by September. Pushed across the Delaware River, Washington fought back with a surprise attack in Trenton, New Jersey on Christmas night, and won another victory at Princeton to revive the rebels' flagging hopes before making winter quarters at Morristown. British strategy in 1777 involved two main prongs of attack, aimed at separating New England from the other colonies. To that end, General John Burgoyne's army marched south from Canada toward a planned meeting with Howe's forces on the Hudson River. Burgoyne's men dealt a devastating loss to the Americans in July by retaking Fort Ticonderoga, while Howe decided to move his troops southward from New York to confront Washington's army near the Chesapeake Bay. The British defeated the Americans at Brandywine Creek, Pennsylvania, on September 11th, and entered Philadelphia on September 25th. Washington rebounded to strike Germantown in early October before withdrawing to winter quarters near Valley Forge. Howe's move had left Burgoyne's army exposed near Saratoga, New York, and the British suffered the consequences of this on September 19th, when an American force under General Horatio Gates defeated them at Freeman's Farm in the First Battle of Saratoga. After suffering another defeat on October 7th at Bemis Heights, Burgoyne surrendered his remaining forces on October 17th, the American victory. Saratoga would prove to be a turning point of the American Revolution, as it prompted France to enter the war openly on the American side, though it would not formally declare war on Great Britain until June 1778. The American Revolution, which had begun as a civil conflict between Britain and its colonies, had become a world war. During the long, hard winter at Valley Forge, Washington's troops benefited from the training and discipline of the Prussian military officer, Baron Friedrich von Steuben, and the leadership of the French aristocrat, Marquis de Lafayette. On June 28, 1778, as British forces under Sir Henry Clinton attempted to withdraw from Philadelphia to New York, Washington's army attacked them near Monmouth, New Jersey. The battle effectively ended in a draw, as the Americans held their ground. But Clinton was able to get his army and supplies safely to New York. On July 8th, a French fleet commanded by the Comte d'Estaing arrived off the Atlantic coast, ready to do battle with the British. A joint attack on the British at Newport, Rhode Island in late July failed, and for the most part, the war settled into a stalemate phase in the north. By the fall of 1781, Greene's American forces had managed to force Cornwallis and his men to withdraw to Virginia's Yorktown Peninsula, near where the York River empties into Chesapeake Bay. Supported by a French army commanded by General Jean-Baptiste de Rochambeau, Washington moved against Yorktown with a total of around 14,000 soldiers, while a fleet of 36 French warships offshore prevented British reinforcement or evacuation. Trapped and overpowered, Cornwallis was forced to surrender his entire army on October 19th. Claiming illness, the British general sent his deputy, Charles O'Hara, to surrender. After O'Hara approached Rochambeau to surrender his sword, Washington gave the nod to his own deputy, Benjamin Lincoln, who accepted it. Though the movement for American independence effectively triumphed at the Battle of Yorktown, contemporary observers did not see that as the decisive victory yet. British and American negotiators in Paris signed preliminary peace terms in Paris late that November, and on September 3, 1783, Great Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States in the Treaty of Paris. At the same time, Britain signed separate peace treaties with France and Spain, which had entered the conflict in 1779, bringing the American Revolution to a close after 8 long years. Through perseverance and unity, the colonies succeeded in securing their independence, creating the United States of America. The American Revolution stands as a testament to the enduring spirit of freedom and the power of a people united in pursuit of a common ideal.